They found his body frozen in 1949, but the tape recorder was still warm. This isn't a creepypasta. This is a top-secret Cold War mission erased from every archive until one forgotten reel exposed it all. A U.S. military captain goes missing in Alaska. Decades later, a Jeep appears in pristine condition, and inside a voice whispering warnings from beyond logic. What was buried in the ice wasn't just metal. It was something alive. Something listening. This is Project Vortex, the true unsolved case that's been quietly terrifying those who dare dig too deep. If you're watching this at night, check who's behind you. Because some stories don't stay frozen. They wait. In November 1949, deep in the Alaskan tundra, where daylight disappears for weeks, Captain Elias Monroe and his crew were dispatched on a routine recon mission. At least, that's what the documents claimed. What they found instead was a signal non-human, repeating, buried beneath layers of ancient ice. The static didn't match any known frequency, but when they amplified it, something answered. Locals warned of cursed caves and voices that mimic the living, but the military called it interference. Until Monroe vanished, his dog tags were found embedded in rock, 17 miles from his last known location. No footprints, no vehicle tracks. Just one word scratched into the ice wall. Listen, and what came next would shake the Pentagon to its core. In 1949, a man disappeared into snow that never gave back what it took until something started whispering from underneath. December, White Raven Ridge, Alaska, an unforgiving strip of frozen wilderness where compasses fail and radio signals scream into static. The U.S. military had no official name for what lay beneath that ridge, but locals called it the Sleeping Mouth. That month, Captain Elias Reed, a highly respected operative with top-level clearance, was flown in under strict blackout protocols. No press, no records, not even a return flight scheduled. His mission classified, his last message. Unintelligible garble, followed by one word that froze every analyst in D.C. awake. Then, nothing. Reed and his entire recon unit vanished. No crash site, no distress beacon, no footprints in the snow. The military sealed the ridge with armed perimeter patrols for months, citing ice instability. But whispers leaked. Something about an underground tremor, a melted patch in the ice that should have taken decades to form, and a thermal signature that wasn't human. Reed's wife was told he died in a training accident. But deep in a classified archive, his file reads, "Missing, do not pursue." And this is just where the nightmare begins. It was supposed to be lost forever until it rolled out of the snow like it had never left. In the winter of 1996, a U.S. Geological Survey team stumbled upon something that shouldn't have existed: a perfectly preserved military Jeep, half buried in the permafrost near White Raven Ridge. The engine was intact. The tires still held air, but it had been registered as destroyed in 1950. The license number matched Captain Elias Reed's unit, the same one that vanished without a trace almost 5 decades earlier. Inside, under a layer of frost and dust, they found something even more disturbing: an old reel-to-reel tape recorder, still sealed, completely undamaged. But here's where it gets terrifying. The tape was dated December 28th, 1949, 4 days after the team officially went missing. When researchers played it back, expecting silence or static, what they heard was wrong. Reed's voice, whispering coordinates, repeating the word open. Then a low sound, not mechanical, not human. A sound that seemed to pulse, like breathing. The recorder clicked off exactly at 3:33 a.m. No explanation, no edits. Just one final chilling line before the reel ended. It hears when we speak. Whatever happened in 1949 never really ended, and someone or something was still listening. It wasn't the wind, It was words trapped in the cold, waiting to be heard again. When analysts at the Department of Defense restored the reel-to-reel tape found in Captain Elias Reed's abandoned Jeep, they expected distortion. They didn't expect a voice that sounded like it had been buried alive. Reed's breathing was shallow, panicked, as if he were hiding whispers bleeding through static. Then came the line that froze everyone who heard it. "This isn't a storm, it's listening." Experts ran the audio through every known filter. There were no signs of tampering, no artificial modulation, no indication of a second voice. But something didn't sit right. When the clip was slowed to half speed, a second frequency became audible. Not a voice, a presence, a layered hum beneath Reed's whisper, rising and falling with his words, like a heartbeat or a reply. Linguists from 3 departments tried to decode it. One went silent after hearing the raw file, another resigned without explanation, and the third he left a single note on his desk. It spoke back. What haunts researchers to this day isn't just what Reed said, but the feeling that something was answering, watching, waiting, and maybe still there, beneath White Raven Ridge. If you think the tape was the end of the mystery, what came next shattered every rule of time, logic, and human understanding. Following the public leak of the 1949 tape, a wave of independent researchers, conspiracy theorists, and even ex-military personnel descended upon White Raven Ridge. But what one man found buried under 17 inches of untouched snow changed everything. It wasn't a relic. It wasn't man-made. It pulsed, and it responded to frequency. Suddenly, what started as a cold case from the past turned into an active event. Locals began reporting strange radio interference, whispers on CB channels, and even missing time. And just when the investigation reached its peak, a new recording surfaced. Not from 1949, from last week, with coordinates pointing back to the same ridge. This time, it wasn't Reed's voice, but someone else calling out into the static. Someone still alive. And what they said, it leads directly into what you're about to hear next. They called it Project Vortex, but nobody ever asked why the name was classified above top secret. In the icy stillness of 1949, Captain Elias Reed wasn't just on a routine reconnaissance mission. He was handpicked for a black tier operation buried so deep in military archives, it technically didn't exist. Codenamed Project Vortex. The mission involved deploying an experimental radio array high into White Raven Ridge, an isolated stretch where signals went to die. But that December, instead of silence, the array picked up something, not static, not Soviet chatter, something that looped back not through the airwaves, but through time itself. Reed's team began reporting nausea, memory gaps, and an eerie sense of being observed. Compass needles spun in slow circles, radios turned on without power, and frequencies shifted before they were dialed. Reed noted all of it in his logbook, but then one entry stopped mid-sentence, pen line trailing off the page like he'd been pulled away. "We're no longer alone on this frequency." From that point forward, transmissions from his squad ceased. The Army buried the incident under layers of red tape. But now, decades later, Project Vortex is no longer silent. Something or someone is transmitting again. And the next transmission is even stranger. It wasn't a distress call. It was a pattern, one that didn't belong here. When analysts ran the recovered tape from the 1996 Jeep discovery through high-resolution spectral software, they expected wind, static, maybe faint radio chatter. Instead, what they found defied every known classification. Beneath Captain Reed's final whisper, its listening was a rhythmic pulse, steady and recursive. One beat every 6.3 seconds. Flawless, cold, mechanical. It was not Morse code, not telemetry, not encryption. It matched no NATO or Soviet frequency, no aviation or satellite band, no marine or cosmic signal. It was alien, not in origin, but in logic. The waveform had precision humans don't use. Not in 1949 and not now. The spacing between each pulse formed a mathematical sequence known as a non-repeating prime mirror. That kind of structure doesn't just happen, it's engineered to be unreadable by accident, but undeniable to intent. Even weirder when the pulse was slowed down and overlaid on thermal satellite data from the ridge. That same night in 1949, it formed a shape, something like an eye, or a satellite, or both. Which begs the terrifying question, was the signal meant for us? Or was it a response to something we sent first? Because now, it's pulsing again. And this time, it's louder. The map doesn't match the land anymore. Captain Reed's voice, once composed and commanding, now trembles with disbelief. Analysts isolated this line from the last 36 seconds of his recording right after the pulse. At first, it seemed like delirium, the ramblings of a man lost in a storm. But when military cartographers overlaid his mission path with topographic data from 1949 and compared it to recent satellite scans, something deeply unsettling emerged. Landmarks recorded in Reed's journal, ridgelines, rock formations, even the frozen river bend no longer exist. Or rather, they've shifted. But not from erosion or avalanche. We're talking meters, sometimes miles of displacement in patterns that defy geologic process. It's as if the land itself had folded, or worse, rearranged. Environmental anomalies now cluster around what should have been Reed's last known position, electromagnetic distortions, gravitational inconsistencies, even flora that doesn't match known Arctic taxonomy. Scientists at first dismissed it as flawed data. Then the same anomalies showed up on drone scans in 2006, 2011, and most recently, 2023. This isn't about a lost map. It's about a changing reality, one that no longer fits inside the lines we thought we understood. And Reed was the first to see it shift. But he wouldn't be the last. It wasn't just the land that shifted, it was everything. After decades of silence, new voices began to emerge from the static. Voices that shouldn't exist. Government files, once classified as myth mitigation, began surfacing in leaked archives, pointing to a terrifying pattern hidden in plain sight. Project Vortex wasn't a one-time anomaly. It was a doorway, but a doorway to what, as investigators pushed deeper into Reed's last known transmissions? What they discover next doesn't just rewrite history, it fractures the very idea of reality itself. And what they heard was never meant for human ears. Beneath the frozen silence of White Raven Ridge, Captain Elias Reed's voice cracked with something not even fear could contain pure disbelief. In the recovered tapes, he speaks of low, rhythmic thuds echoing beneath the glacial surface, as if something massive was stirring far below the ice. Then came the light's cold blue pulses moving beneath his feet, perfectly synchronized, vanishing whenever he tried to document them. But it was the sound that shattered his composure, an echo with no origin, bouncing back at him from all directions, repeating words he never said. It knew my name, he whispered. It called out in my voice, from under the ice. The further he moved, the more the sounds evolved like whispers mutating into sentences, then into screams that no one else could hear. Radio signals scrambled violently whenever he approached these anomalies. Compasses spun in circles, and the stars overhead no longer aligned with his maps. Reed wasn't just lost, he was being watched. The deeper he went, the more reality bent around him. Something ancient was waiting under that ice, and it had just woken up. But what it wanted still hadn't been revealed. At this point in the tape, only two voices remained, Captain Elias Reed and Lieutenant Mark Halley. The others gone without a trace. No signs of struggle, no screams, just silence. But it's Reed's voice that starts to fracture, unraveling like a thread pulled too tight. In the early logs, he speaks with military precision, but by the 15th entry, his tone shifts jittery, paranoid, soaked in confusion. He repeats the same sentence 3 times. They're not missing. They're taken. Hallie tries to calm him down, but even Hallie's voice begins to tremble. Something was distorting their thoughts, a presence that didn't need words to speak. Reed begins to question what's real. Mark's eyes, they're not his anymore, he mutters, then laughs, high-pitched and broken. It's the kind of laugh you hear from someone whose grip on reality is shattering. The air around them felt wrong, too quiet, too thick, like sound itself was being muffled by something watching, something ancient. Even the instruments went rogue, compasses spun wildly. Watches stopped ticking, and Reed's voice becomes the only thread left tethering us to what happened, or what we thought happened. And then, Hallie goes silent. Then came the line that froze every analyst who heard it. Mark's not Mark anymore. He stared too long. Reed's voice is barely above a whisper. Brittle. Haunted, like he's trying not to breathe too loudly in something else's presence. You can hear the fear, not just in his words, but in the silence that follows. It's the kind of silence that feels alive. That sentence, just 7 words, has become one of the most infamous military audio clips ever leaked, sparking decades of theories across Reddit, deep web forums, and conspiracy channels. Some say Mark was possessed. Others believe he was replaced. But whatever happened, Reed's tone tells us it wasn't human. His breathing is erratic. Papers shuffle. Then he said, almost pleading, "Don't look at the lights. Don't let them see you thinking." There's a scuffle in the background, a faint humming, and then Reed gasps a long, guttural intake of breath, like he just saw something no man was meant to see. If you listen closely, right before the tape cuts, there's a final, trembling whisper. I think it's learning our names. This isn't survival anymore. It's containment, or worse, mimicry. What if the real secret wasn't buried in the snow, but encoded in Reed's final words? Welcome to part 4, where theories collide and hidden patterns emerge. This is where the rabbit hole goes deep. From waveform anomalies to satellite blackouts that coincidentally matched Reed's last known coordinates, digital sleuths began connecting dots no one dared before. And what they found, it changes everything. But the most terrifying revelation wasn't just what was down there. It was why we stopped looking, and what we might have brought back. Let's decode the unexplainable. In 2003, during a classified Arctic radar sweep, analysts stumbled upon something that shattered protocol and logic like a hollow chamber nearly 900 feet long, buried deep beneath the White Raven Ridge. But this wasn't just a cave. It was warm, radiating heat, in the dead center of permafrost that hadn't melted in over 10,000 years. Military-grade infrared confirmed it a steady, pulsing thermal signature, unnatural, rhythmic, alive. Scientists scrambled for explanations. Geothermal vent equipment glitch, but none could explain the impossible consistency, the unchanging pulse, the whispering static that began to echo through monitoring equipment the moment they locked onto its frequency. Even more unsettling, the chamber's coordinates were less than a mile from where Reed vanished, and the pulse matched the pattern from his recovered tape. Coincidence? Not a chance. Whatever was buried beneath that ancient ice wasn't dormant. It was waiting. And suddenly, everything we thought we knew about that mission, that ridge, even reality itself fractured. Because nature doesn't leave perfect heat signatures, and caves don't whisper back. And now, we ask what else is hidden beneath, or worse, what's trying to come out. In 2011, a deep core expedition team drilling near the heat anomaly hit something that instantly halted all progress. Not ice, not rock, but a seamless metallic structure buried 300 feet below the surface. At first, they assumed it was military debris, until sparks from the drill triggered no damage, no dent, not even a scratch. Metallurgists were flown in. Their verdict: this isn't any known Earth alloy. The material resisted all chemical corrosion, didn't oxidize, and under extreme heat it pulsed. Not like a machine, like a nerve. A living reaction, a retractable filament, thin as hair, was retrieved and sent to top labs around the world. None could classify it. Not even close. One physicist quit the project, claiming the molecular structure responded to thought patterns during testing. The Pentagon sealed off the entire sector within days. And just like that, the story vanished from public record. But not before one file leaked a thermal image showing the metal tunnel extending far beyond known Arctic bedrock. Almost. Downward. Into nothing. Into something older, unmapped. And if the laws of physics break down here, what else might still be buried? Watching, calculating, waiting to awaken. Long before satellites or scientific probes, the Inuit elders told of something far older than ice, an entity they call Ijurak. It doesn't walk. It waits. It doesn't hunt. It imitates. According to oral tradition, Ijurak is a shapeshifter that copies not only the face and form of anyone it sees, but their voice, their thoughts, their intentions. But something is always slightly off. A laugh that comes half a second too late. A shadow that doesn't quite follow. Stories speak of hunters who returned with the wrong eyes. Mothers who sang lullabies in unfamiliar rhythms. Children who claimed their father had come home, except he was already there, staring back. One chilling tale describes a man who saw his exact double across the frozen lake, whispering his name in perfect tone. He fled. The double followed smiling. Modern researchers brushed it off as folklore, until they played Reed's final tape and heard two identical voices overlapping. One frantic, one calm, both claiming to be him. If Ijurak isn't just myth, if it lives beneath, waiting, watching, then what if Reed wasn't alone out there? What if something came back instead? In the final minutes of tape 7, Reed's voice no longer sounds like a man, it trembles like a frequency struggling to hold itself together. "It's remembering things I never lived," he whispers, barely audible under the crackle of Arctic wind. Not "I'm remembering," it's remembering. The pronoun slips, the identity fractures. He begins to describe childhood memories from places he never visited, birthdays with people no one in his life ever knew. Dreams that feel like stolen tapes played on repeat, except someone else was behind the camera. He talks about a dog he never owned, a wife he never married, a funeral he never attended, and a name Julian that keeps echoing in his head. Researchers initially blamed psychological stress, but the neurological scans told a different story. Memory traces formed in areas of the brain where no experiential data should exist. Memories that didn't belong to Reed at all. Or worse, belong to something wearing Reed. When you stand too long in the void, what if the void doesn't just stare back? What if it starts to upload itself into you? What if he wasn't haunted but overwritten? The tape ends not with static, but with a voice so close it sounds like it's whispering inside your own skull. Reed, no longer composed, no longer coherent, pleads, "Turn it off." They're listening now. His tone is hollow, like it's being filtered through layers of something not human. Researchers initially thought it was just paranoia until the lab's audio system glitched and played the phrase again, unprompted, 47 hours later on a loop. But no one had pressed play. No one had touched the tape. Surveillance footage showed only an empty room. The timestamp 3:33 a.m. Exactly when Reed's file was flagged as digitally corrupted. The waveform analysis revealed anomalies, subsonic patterns, mimicking neural rhythms, frequencies designed to be heard not by ears but by the brain itself. Was the voice a warning or a transmission? One investigator resigned that night, claiming he'd seen a figure in the reflection of the lab monitor, a figure that looked exactly like him, but blinked 1 second too late. Since then, Tape 7 has been classified as restricted media, Not because of what's on it, but because of what it might still be doing. Listening, rewriting, waiting. What if the tape wasn't just a record, but an invitation? Part 5 begins where logic unravels. Military analysts tried to bury it. The signal was blacklisted, and Reed's name was erased from official logs. But the footage leaked. On the dark web, users claimed the broadcast triggered shared dreams, nightmares sinking across continents. Now, whispers online say the tape isn't haunted, it's alive. Patterns in the static mirror, ancient glyphs. Voice prints from the recording don't match any known vocal structure except one found embedded in a 12,000-year-old Inuit carving. Coincidence or contact? The deeper you listen, the more it listens back. And just when you think it's over, that's when it begins again. Next, the unredacted coordinates, the final search, and what they found sealed beneath the ice, still pulsing. They found it 20 miles from the last known location, wedged inside a tree trunk, as if fired like a bullet. A standard-issue military ID tag. Name Colin Reed. But here's the impossible part: the branch had grown around the tag, sealing it in bark and time. Carbon dating suggests the growth predated the expedition by at least 5 years. Experts went silent. No one could explain how a fresh ID ended up entombed in old wood. The media spun it as a prank, but the locals, they whispered about voices in the forest, cold without wind, animals migrating in reverse. One hunter claimed the trees sometimes blink. Now, the tag sits locked in a private archive, unlisted, unseen except for one leaked photo showing a strange burn pattern etched onto the metal concentric circles spiraling inward. Like an eye, like a warning. And next to it, scribbled in what appears to be Reed's own handwriting, "It remembers who looks." What does that even mean? Next, we follow the final transmission, the one never meant to reach human ears. In 1972, Project Vortex vanished officially. Every file, every reel, every transmission was erased from federal archives in what one internal memo chillingly called a strategic nullification. It was as if the expedition never existed. But silence always leaves traces. A handful of redacted documents slipped through the cracks accidentally or deliberately. One shows thermal maps of impossible heat signatures beneath miles of Arctic ice. Another, a psychiatric report dated weeks before the wipe, describes a surviving officer exhibiting mirror reversal cognition and claiming, "The sun sets inside now." Handwriting on the margins reads, "Burn this, or it'll remember you." These fragments were leaked decades later through anonymous dead drops mailed in unmarked envelopes, buried in declassified clutter. Reddit threads tried to connect the dots, but many went mysteriously offline. A few who posted screenshots, accounts deleted, devices wiped. One user received a physical letter that read, "Only we told you once." That should have been enough. Why erase something so completely unless it was never supposed to be discovered in the first place? And if this is what they tried to hide, what was buried deeper still in our final segment, we trace the only known survivor, or what's left of him. In 2019, journalist Clara Venn began digging into the long-forgotten whispers of Project Vortex. She filed FOIA requests, interviewed retired military techs, and traced decades-old shipment logs that led her to a defunct airstrip in northern Alaska, just 40 miles from where Reed's last signal faded. Her blog, once obscure, exploded in virality after she uploaded what she claimed was a heavily degraded audio file from the original mission. It was quickly flagged, removed, and mirrored by Reddit sleuths only for those re-uploads to mysteriously vanish hours later. Days later, Clara disappeared. No credit card activity, no cell pings, no passport use. Just a single text message sent to her editor at 3:09 a.m. It's not gone. It just changes shape. That text was traced to a burner phone found in her apartment sink, melted from the inside. Friends reported lights flickering the night before. Her hard drive fused shut. A chilling question now remains. What did she find that cost her everything? And worse, was it watching her before she ever looked for it? In our final seconds, we confront the theory no one dares say out loud, but deep down, everyone fears. Locals call it echo spine, a name whispered with uneasy reverence. Never said after dark. At first glance, it's just a stretch of jagged ridges, wind-carved and ice-bitten. But if you speak, something speaks back. Not an echo, not a trick of sound. It's your voice, perfectly mimicked but warped, delayed, and then wrong. A fisherman once told investigators, "I asked who was there." The voice came back and said, "Who is there?" But it wasn't me anymore. Others claimed they heard childhood lullabies sung in the voice of dead relatives, sentences they never remembered saying, arguments that never happened yet sounded terrifyingly familiar. Scientists attributed it to auditory mirages. The Inuit call it Ilarak, the one that hides inside your sound. Audio samples captured by hikers showed frequency distortions resembling human speech, but backward. One researcher fainted after hearing his own voice whisper secrets he'd never told anyone. Echo spine isn't just a place that listens, it learns. And as one survivor said before vanishing into the ridge, when it knows your voice, it doesn't need you anymore. And that brings us to the final, most chilling clue. There's a theory one that scientists dismiss, but locals refuse to say out loud. They believe Reed never died. Not really. That whatever he encountered in that frozen abyss didn't kill him. It rewrote him, changed him. And now, he's not trapped in the ice. He is the ice, waiting, watching, absorbing every vibration, every voice. They say the thing beneath Vortex Station doesn't hunt by sight or smell, but by memory. The more you think about it, the more it thinks about you. In 2021, a podcast host joked about Reed's story, then claimed her laptop kept turning on at night, playing back her own voice in whispers she'd never recorded. 1 week later, she vanished. All that remained was a final audio clip. If you're hearing this, it's too late. It already knows you. So ask yourself right now who's really listening, because this story, it's not just a tale from the past. If you made it this far, it's listening to you now. And deep beneath the ice, something stirs. So maybe now you're asking yourself, was any of it real? But that's the problem with truth wrapped in silence. It doesn't need your belief to exist. Whether Reed ever made it out or became something else entirely. One fact remains every time we dig too deep, stare too long, or listen too closely. Something always stares back. And the scariest part, it doesn't need to touch you to change you. Just remembering this story might be enough. But now that you've heard it, what will you do with it? Will you scroll away and pretend none of this ever reached you? Or will you leave a comment and tell us what you think Reed saw? Save this video just in case it disappears. And hit subscribe, because the next time something vanishes, you might be the only one who remembers it ever existed.